Hello everyone, we're about to talk about set design for UIL Theatrical Design Contest. If you watched my first segment, you have determined where your interests and strengths lie, and you're curious about set design. So first things first, make sure that you have read your script from cover to cover and that you understand all of the worlds for which you must design. Make sure that you have read both the handbook and this year's theatrical design prompt, and that you understand all of the components that you're going to be required to pull together in order to complete this project. So first things first, do your homework, make sure you understand what's expected of you. In this segment, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to approach that design process, depending on what you're interested in, what your strengths are, and what you want to learn and what you want to try. Important things to consider this year as you're doing your research is remember that we have to place this entire show in the prison setting, and that all of the different places that the characters act in have to be accomplished by pulling in parts of the prison world, which makes it fun and it makes it challenging, and it makes you really have to think out of the box and be creative as to exactly how you're going to do that. Bearing all that in mind as you begin researching artwork, remember if you're going to set design, you're going to, of course, be looking for artist interpretation of Don Quixote, Man of La Mancha, and you're going to be looking for artwork over the years that inspires your design process. Remember, as you begin that, you are designing the place. Don't get totally caught up in human figures, abstract things. They can help you, but remember you're designing a place. So as you look for the artwork that's in the style that inspires you, make sure you're considering how that can be applied to this space, which is the prison, that then transforms into the inn and transforms into, the church and some of the other places that we're going to be expected to have these characters be believably placed. So bearing that in mind, as you do some of your research, think places. Be consistent with your art style. Whatever inspires you, stick to that. I'm going to show you some inspiration boards. I like to have my students come up with their inspiration boards first. There are some teachers, there are some students who prefer to do their designs first and then come back and make sure that that design is reflected completely in their inspiration boards. I have had students come back and add cool things that they've discovered in the design process, but I do tend to have them start their boards first. And so here's an example from several years ago of a set design board that did well, and the student designed Into the Woods, but chose to build using origami as her inspiration. And what you'll notice is that as she designed, she was very consistent about making sure that the world that she was going to design was reflected, that she was looking at items that she would include that help design those scenic elements. Be sure that you're thinking about that as you are finding that visual inspiration in art. So there is an example, and that was well done and consistent as far as the choices in the inspiration board. And I've got another one here. Again, this is from a couple years ago, and it's kind of beat up, but they were designing from the zodiac, from constellations. And so she was careful to make sure that as she was researching how to create this world and the interiors of these homes, that she found examples in both architecture and furniture and design ideas that she would be incorporating into the actual set design and the furnishings of these homes that she had to design. Examples, simple, of how to make sure that you are focused on the world that the actors are going to live in while they are on stage. Here's another example of imagery, circus imagery, for another board. Consistency and remembering that you're designing for that concept and for that world. Okay. So we're going to go back and visit once you have your inspiration lined out. And you don't have to put everything on the board to start, but make sure that you have good, consistent ideas about how you're going to approach it and what you want this world to look like. The fun thing is there's no limits to it this year and what we can do. Okay, the next thing that I have my students do after they've got their inspiration is they need to go ahead and do their scale ground plans. One of the things that, one way to approach it is to draw by hand, to draw your scale drawings by hand. I've had students do that in the past more than once. If you're choosing to draw your scale ground plans by hand, then you need this little gem. This is a ruler that will put things to scale. And, you know, depending on the space and the size of your drawing, you may choose to use some different size scales. And this handy dandy little thing here gives you lots of different options. I'm going to show you this example because our space is limited. And this student had to do scale ground plans for 3 different sets. She used that ruler and then she created her ground plans using, oh, I'm so upside down. Oh my goodness. Okay. But here's an example of the 3 different sets that she was going to design, and she was able to do those to scale on the board size that she needed to. Be sure that you remember to include all of the important elements that are expected of you as a designer, including your title block, your scale, the scenes that you're designing. All of that stuff is lined out very clearly for you in the prompt and in the handbook. So make sure that you, as you're designing, that you have that with you on your phone or your laptop or your computer to reference as you go so that you're approaching things correctly from beginning to end. So if you want to draw your scale ground plan by hand, that is definitely an option. So she's got her inspiration board. She did her scale plan and then went ahead and rather than rendering things in drawing, she built a model. And so these are the 3 sets and their transformation realized. And it is built and designed and photographed and then mounted to show the 3 different sets and how they were going to change. So this was partially built at her home and then brought up to school and photographed. One of the things that I can tell you, if you're going to do this, make sure you do it in decent light and make sure you make a nice little model of the stage and the set. That's easy for the judge to see that realized concept. Another thing that's important to include is a figure for human size in these renderings. So make sure that you include that. So that's one option for you if you're just not that person that's very confident artistically. You can do this and not have to draw a thing if you choose to. If you want to do your ground plan by hand, your scale ground plan, you can do that by hand, or I'm going to share with you some other options if you are more computer savvy or you already have some familiarity with drafting software. That can make your life a lot easier, and it's neat and clean and makes a really professional presentation. One of the things that you need to bear in mind as you are creating your ground plans is that you need to use these standards. They're easy to look up. All you have to do is look up Scenic Design and Technical Production by USITT Graphic Standards. This will pop up in your Google search, and you can print it out. And there are certain symbols that we are expected to use in drafting for theater. And it's really simple, it's really easy to follow. My students have never had any trouble making sense of how they're supposed to label and draw these items on stage. So this is a must-have so that you make sure that the symbols and that the terminology that you're using is correct. Another thing that was given to me by another teacher was an Autocad cheat sheet We don't have access to AutoCAD on our campus, but there are some ag departments or schools that actually have like a drafting, interior design departments that may have access to this. And any of these documents that you'd like, I'll share my email with you in this presentation, and you can email me and I'll make sure that you get them. I'm not familiar with CAD software. I'm not an expert at any of that. What I did find out about was this handy dandy little thing called Sketchup, and I'm turning my phone here so that you can see the icons on our computer. Sketchup, it's this, and there's layout, and then there's style builder as well. I've got all of those with that software. It is free. It's free for educators. All I had to do was show a picture of myself on the school website, prove I was a teacher, and I applied for the license and they gave it to me for free. I just reapply every year, they give me another license, and I get to use it on my computers for free. I have actually had students teach each other how to use SketchUp because it's pretty simple. I've played around in it a little bit, but I'm not confident enough to be able to teach it. I've actually had students teach it to each other. I'll show you some examples of those renderings done and ground plans done that way. Okay, this student, again, they had to design multiple sets this year, but this student did her scale drawings or her scale ground plans using SketchUp. And it just makes a nice, neat, really clean, really professional ground plan. And she taught herself. I just got the software and she taught herself how to use it. Those were her ground plans. And then this was also done in SketchUp, where she could actually do color renderings of each ground plan and how it changed. And she was actually able to pull patterns for wallpaper and things like that that she needed to be very specific, that were very purposeful in her designs. She was able to pull those in and incorporate those in the software into her renderings. So for those of you that are really computer savvy, you're great at YouTube, you can figure anything out, and you would feel more confident doing this nice digital rendering, this might be the way that you want to go. You might want to go ahead and have your teacher get that free license and get in there and dig around and figure out how to play with it. One thing I've learned about you is there's nothing you can't figure out on YouTube. This was renderings that were also done in SketchUp, and he pulled images right down off the patterns and images right down off the internet, and he was able to apply them to his renderings for the realized set design. I still have a copy of his undisplayed rough ground plan, scale ground plan right here, that he did all of that on SketchUp. And she actually taught him how to do it. So they helped each other out, learning and mastering how to use that software. So one option for you is drawing and labeling to scale by hand. Just make sure you include all of those important elements. Using computer-aided drafting and rendering, which is wonderful and creates a beautiful professional piece of work. And then the other option is if you're that person who's amazingly talented and loves to go ahead and draw and wants to render by hand your set. I had a student who did that. She decided that this year she was going to work in watercolors, and so she went ahead and drew her set and included the figure for reference and did full scale color rendering of the set on the board by hand. So there are several options depending on where your interests lie and your artistic abilities and your strength and what you want to learn and how you want to grow. So those are the ways that that you can go ahead and do the presentation of this year's set design. Don't forget your justification. Make sure you're consistent. One of the things that I tell all of my students is to be sure that every single thing you do has a purpose. Make sure that if you put it on that ground plan or you put it in the rendering, that it's well thought out, that you have in your mind a way that that's going to be realized by actors on the stage by set builders who are going to have to bring this to life. One of the fun things for me is I watch my students work and they bounce their ideas off me. I love to sit and try to visualize what that's going to look like on stage, and I get excited, and things are cool, and the ideas they come up with are awesome. So make sure that you're justifying every choice, that you're consistent, that your ideas are reflected clearly in places and spaces, and that they're inspired by your art, and that you're knowledgeable. One of the things I'm encouraging my students to do this year is make sure that you understand your art terminology. Make sure you do some color research. Make sure that you solidly understand what your inspiration is so that you can articulately talk about it, and that you can justify your design choices based on what you know about the art and the world that you're choosing to design. My email is kfryman, F-R-Y, like you fry food, M-A-N, like a man, kfryman, at meisd.org. And any of these resources or samples, I don't have a problem at all scanning them, sending any documents or any help to you. Or if you're kind of stuck or need some advice, I would be more than happy to provide that to you. Hopefully that this is helpful. And again, I'm always open to help or advice in any way that I can. Best of luck as you design, and enjoy the creative process.